Welcome to MellyS The Story Collector web TV, where we get to share inspiring stories from courageous individuals about the moments and experiences that have shaped their lives. In this episode, we get to talk to the gorgeous Tracey Lawrence, who is sharing with us her journey of losing two parents to dementia, and why it is so fundamentally important to have those deep conversations with your loved ones before they get to that point of no return.
I want to share this particular story with everyone because I know in my heart that when people hear a story that resonates with them, it will give them the courage and the motivation that they need to live their lives at a higher vibration, to be able to live their lives with more joy and more quality of life. Because I learned a long time ago that when you live in fear, you die 1,000 deaths.
That's powerful.
Thank you. So, I want people to understand that there are things that happen in life that are terrifying, that seem like we can never get past them, but we can. We're stronger than we think we are, and it's important to just take it a day at a time, sometimes a minute at a time, and get through it. Because years later, you'll look back and say, wow, I can't believe I went through all that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Such a powerful message too.
Thank you.
So what story would you like to share then that goes with such a powerful message?
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about my folks because, my parents were lovely people, and I had a very nice relationship with my father in particular. My mother a little less so, but I loved her. Um,
It's always that relationship with mother and daughter, isn't it?
yeah, she could be tough, and she was tough on me.
Yeah.
But my dad and I had a great relationship because we had kind of slugged it out at one point, not physically, but emotionally. And we had come to an understanding where he and I were really good friends. And my parents, when they retired, ultimately moved to Florida. And I live in northern New Jersey, here in the United States. And
So how far is that from you then?
about 1,400 miles.
Oh, okay. So quite a fair distance.
Yeah. So it's not like I could see them all the time, but my father and I used to talk on the phone quite a lot. And my dad was very interested in my life and my, what my husband and I were up to. And, we talked at least once a week, sometimes more, depending on what was going on. And I thought that my dad was doing well. That's how he represented things. But in time, we got together for a little family get together in Florida in the spring of 2003. And I got to see my dad, and I realized that he wasn't quite as well as he was representing.
Oh,
Yeah, he was sick, and I didn't know how sick, but it was kind of alarming because, one of the interesting things that I've come to realize, I thought, my father was being really masterful at disguising what was going on with him. But the truth is that as his child, I didn't want to believe that anything was going on that was, that was in any way, unpleasant. And so I was kind of complicit in helping him to,
you,
carry on that masquerade.
yeah, you're choosing not to see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so when I did go to see both my parents, and saw the way my father was moving, and he was clearly in pain and not doing real well, it was alarming. And shortly after that visit, my father had gone for an open lung biopsy to find out why he was having such trouble breathing. and he was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis,
What's
which,
it do?
yeah, it makes the lobes in the lungs stiff, because
Okay.
your
Yeah.
lungs really need to be pliant in order to be able to breathe properly, and his were, like very, very, like tight, so he couldn't breathe well.
Yeah.
At the same time, when they did that procedure, they didn't close him up very well, and he was bleeding internally and didn't realize
Whoa.
it. Yeah. So I was talking to my dad on the phone, and he was telling me he wasn't feeling well, and I said, Dad, please, call the 911, get to the hospital. And he said he promised that he would call if he didn't feel better soon. And that was Sunday night. And Monday morning at 8 a.m., I called my parents' apartment and nobody picked up the phone. So I called the local hospital and I asked if Herb Lawrence was in the hospital. And they said, well, yes, he is. So I went on down to Florida immediately, got on the first plane down and marched into the hospital and walked into his room, and he was sitting up in bed, and he looked at me with such shock, and he said, how did you find me? And I said, I'm a genius, Dad. I figured it out. And I said, so how are you feeling? He's like, what do you mean? It's like, you're in the hospital, you're sick, I'm sick.
Mm.
And that's when I realized that things were really, really bad, because he could not remember how he got to the hospital. His short-term memory completely evaporated.
Whoa. Is that because of what happened?
Well, there were other things going on, but this major health crisis made him vulnerable, and he could no longer carry on the charade that he was okay.
Yeah.
And the house of cards came tumbling down. And what was never properly diagnosed, my father had dementia, but in time, I came to understand that it was vascular dementia. And that made sense in context of the other things that were wrong with him, including coronary artery disease, for which he had been treated with double bypass when he was 56.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So my father had been a 3-pack-a-day smoker for a long time. And he was not terribly fit, and his diet wasn't great. So all those things put together conspired to make him a sick man when he was in his 70s. So the bypass surgery, gave him 20 good years where he was functioning well, and he did stop smoking. God bless him. He stopped smoking cold turkey. But the other things, like not getting a lot of exercise and not really paying much attention to his diet, things happen. So it was very distressing. And my brother and my brother also lives in northern New Jersey with his family. And we decided that we would bring my parents north to get my father looked at and to find out what was going on with him. And unfortunately, we basically confirmed what we were told by the Floridian doctors, was that my father had a lot of things wrong with him. He had pulmonary fibrosis. He had he had a hiatal hernia and an early cancer in his esophagus, and congestive heart failure, low blood pressure. So he was a mess. And the cherry on the top of the cake was that he just didn't want to live because he was no longer the person he valued being.
Yeah.
He was in sheer terror all the time because he could not remember how he got in a particular place at any given time.
Yeah.
So, it got to a point where, I realized that there were a lot of things that I needed to know. And I didn't know how many of those things my mother knew. And so I would have to ask them really pointy questions.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about my dad, though, was that he had what are called lucid windows, where he would just all of a sudden he would like show up like with all of his faculties.
Yep.
And if I talked about anything financial, I mean, I would uncover, like, you know, oh, where did this annuity come from? He said, oh, I bought that annuity in 1979, and it was for this much money, and this was the interest rate. And I was just like, why'd you shut up, Dad? That's cool, you know. And then the next thing I knew, he was like, you know, he didn't know where he was or why he was there. So, you know, and you know, it was just it was really interesting. Now, I was a graphic artist most of my adult life, so, you know, having to deal with my parents' finances and geriatric illnesses and cognitive decline and long-term care insurance and all this other stuff that I found myself confronted with, it was all like brand new stuff to me. And it was just startling. And I had to acquire a whole new skill set.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, I'm having to deal with the idea that I'm losing my father, who is also my friend. And I'm having to deal with my mom, who's in denial and is very dependent on my father, and is treating me like garbage because she can, because I'm there. And so it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot on your plate emotionally, let alone the physicalities of what you need to do to help support them as well.
Yes, yes. And, you know, having my parents come live in my house was kind of like, you know, you know, I don't think it's a natural thing for any adult to have their parents live in their house. You know, if you're not used to it, it is a huge slap in the head.
Yeah.
So that was kind of difficult.
Yeah.
But ultimately, my dad's condition continued to deteriorate, and there were a lot of things that happened along the way, but we made some decisions, including moving my folks to an assisted living facility so that they could each have their own room. My father was hallucinating constantly, and he would act out in his hallucinations. So when he and my mother were sharing a bed, my father would do things to my mother that would bruise her.
Yeah.
He was doing, and he was acting out so her arm would be covered in bruises, and I was concerned for her, and I didn't have another bed to put her in.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I also knew that they needed to be in close proximity, because when he started to freak out, he'd look for Mom.
Yeah.
So we persuaded them to take this apartment in an assisted living facility where they could be together but be in separate beds, and also have additional support, so that when things were getting crazy, there was always somebody there to 24/7 to help them.
Yeah.
And when I mentioned, when we talked to my dad about this idea, and the whole idea of spending so much money to be in an apartment with assistants, his first reaction was, "You ain't gonna warehouse me." And I said, "No, Dad, we're not going to warehouse you. But what we are going to do is we're going to ask you to stay in this apartment with Mom, so that you can get the care that you need, and she can have the backup that she needs to help take care of you."
Yeah.
Because, I can't do it here in my house. I would if I could, but we're not set up for it.
Yeah.
And that was a very tough conversation to have, but he saw the wisdom in it, and he allowed it. And they moved into that place. And my father, they weren't there for very long, because not too soon after they moved in, my father died of congestive heart failure. So, and that's the start of my story, which in time, my mom lived on her own in Florida for a couple of years, and then she started having some issues, and it became clear that she was developing cognitive decline, and I was going to have to sharpen up my caregiving skills yet again, and bring mom to come live with us in New Jersey, while she entered her downward spiral,
Yeah.
and that led me to write my book, Dementia Sucks. And few
It
people
does.
know as well as I do.
So how did you keep yourself sane through all that? Because there was so much on your plate, and having to confront your parents declining and becoming dependent on you, that takes a lot of courage to stay strong in that moment and not regress to the inner child and just mourn for someone who is still physically there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, one of the things that I did was, number one, I journaled. I'm my way of coping when things are going crazy is to write stuff down. That's always been my nature. By writing things out, it's kind of like allows them out of my bloodstream.
It's
I
a
pour out
relief.
all the toxins, and then, if after doing that, a couple days later, I'll go back and massage it and make it into something that's more digestible by other people. Because I like to, when I write, I like to inform, and I also like to entertain. I guess you could tell I have kind of a sense of humor. I like to make people laugh, and I like to take things that are scary or upsetting and put kind of an amusing spin on it. Because look, we're all going to have to go through some uncomfortable things in life. It's not all unicorns and rainbow poop. There's a, there's a lot of ugly that we all have to go through, and a lot of sadness, and a lot of illness, and I mean, it's life is it changes, and but the cool thing is that if you have the right perspective, you understand that when those bad things happen, they're there so that you appreciate the great stuff that happens. It's
Yes.
that you can truly feel gratitude. And my life is all about gratitude. I feel like I'm one of the most blessed people who's ever walked this stinking planet. And I feel very blessed to be here. I feel blessed that my parents did so many smart things before they died, that they bestowed me with so many gifts, genetically and intellectually, and every other way that you can imagine. And I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to help them, to give back to them, to be able to give each of them, and forgive me, there are going to be people who are going to hear this and go, ah, but I gave them both a good death.
Yep.
And I think that is one of the most beautiful and loving things that you can do for another human being, is to help them to have the best possible death, so that they don't know fear and they don't know pain, that they're just able to transition to the other side with that as little angst as possible. And I was able to do that for both of my parents, and I am very grateful for that.
That's so beautiful. That's just beautiful to be able to do that for somebody and not put yourself into that situation, because that's hard to watch someone slip away. But
oh yeah,
there's a lot of emotions in that, and honoring them, and it's the fact it's their journey, not your own. That's huge.
Yes. Well, but you know what? It is your journey too. I learned so much from what I went through with them, and it inspired me to create a business and to publish my book, or get my book published, I should say, and to be able to share my knowledge and share what I've been through with others, so that they will be motivated to be more proactive, so that they will be more cognizant of what happens when caregiving comes into your life, and so that they will be uh, more willing to practice self-care, to
Yeah.
understand the importance of that. You know, I talk a lot in the book about yoga and meditation and doing those kinds of things to be able to you know, preserve myself.
Yeah.
Exercise, very important.
Yeah.
Um,
Because, yeah,
and
if you're not healthy, how can you look after these other people? You need to be looking after yourself first.
yes, and most caregivers don't don't go by that, and they feel guilty if they take time out for themselves. They feel guilty about it, like that, like they took time away from these other people, and it's like, look, you go down in flames. Everyone who depends on you goes down in flames. So you really owe it to everyone in your life to take very good care of yourself.
Yeah.
It's extremely important. Did you know that 50% of family caregivers of people with dementia die before the people they're taking care of?
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
That's a
Oh
horrible thing.
yes, it is, and that's part of the reason why I do this, because I've known people who died from what I call reckless caregiving,
Mm.
because they weren't
Yeah.
looking after themselves, because they would get sick and they'd be so focused on taking care of this other person that they wouldn't go to the hospital, and they would die. And then what happens? You know, then that person has to be looked after by someone else who probably isn't going to do the same job you would. And in some cases there isn't anybody else, and then the state has to step in.
Yeah.
What a horror, you know. So um I want people to take better care of themselves. Oh, and by the way, if it's a spouse of someone with dementia, if they die 63% of the time before the person that they're taking care of.
Wow.
Yeah. So folks, if you have elderly folks and one of your parents has dementia and the other is looking after them, please look after them. When they say, "I got this," they don't.
Yep. Yep. Take that at face value.
Yeah, visit often. I know it's hard, and it takes courage. All right, because they are going to give you the stiff arm. They are going to give you a hard time. They are going to try to do things to upset you, because the thing is that they feel like they're losing control, and they are. So what they will do instead is try to regain control by controlling you. They will push your buttons because they know exactly where they are.
Yep.
So, but it's really important that to understand what's going on,
Yeah.
that what they're doing is coming out of fear, and that by being compassionate and that's my cat. Um, by being compassionate and by being loving and patient, you can really help them to understand that it's okay to be scared.
Yeah.
You'll hang in, and you'll help them, and it's okay to take help from you. You know, and
It's really
all.
having those conversations with them that are very uncomfortable, but
Mhm.
need to be said in order to help each other.
Yes, yes, and it's extremely important to have them. But most people are frightened, and a lot. I hear a lot of aging parents say, "Well, I don't want to burden my kids with this stuff." And it's like, well, you're going to be a lot more of a burden if you don't have the conversation,
Yeah.
because one way or another, you're going to get involved. And if you don't have the conversation, then you're burdening them with second guessing you, trying to figure things out on their own, and the guilt that they'll feel for not having had the conversation, and for possibly not honoring your wishes because you didn't make them clear.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's the biggest burden, and I talk to families all the time. That's what my business has become. I talk to mostly to the adult children, but also to their parents, and I have successfully persuaded resistant parents to have those conversations, and I've gotten people who would not do estate planning to finally do their estate plans. And it's easier for me because I'm not their child.
Yeah. Yeah. So
You know,
yeah, you can come in and with that impartialness to everything that's happening and say, no, this is what you need to do, and this is the result if you don't do it. Yep.
right? Or I never tell people what they need to do, but I will give them examples of
Yep.
people who didn't do what I suggest they do, and what some of the consequences are.
Yep.
Yeah, I love talking about like Aretha Franklin,
Mm.
the Queen of Soul,
Yeah.
right?
What happened with Aretha?
Oh, well, she died without a will, and she knew she was sick for a long time. She left $90 million and two feuding kids and a niece, I believe. They're all fighting over her estate because she didn't bother to put it in writing.
And that's horrible to think that a family's being broken up over something as trivial as that.
Yeah, and I mean that's a boatload of money.
Yeah.
How about Prince? Prince died with millions of dollars, and he had a child, and no one benefited because he didn't have a will. You
Mm.
know, and it's tragic because this money gets squandered and it goes to all the wrong people. If I'm sure if Prince had known what was going to happen to his legacy, all right, I think he probably would have done something a little different.
Yeah.
But and there are lots of those stories. People die. Very famous people die without wills, and because they die without a will, their business becomes public record.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
everybody knows what was left and who the players are, and it's more fodder for the tabloids.
Yeah.
You know, and even people who are like celebrities who are pretty private, all their dirty laundry is laid out for the world to see. Now, of course, they're not around, to suffer it any longer, but their families are.
Yeah. And then someone else is dealing with the consequence of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, folks, get a will. It's not that big a deal.
I love it. I love it.
I don't have a whole lot. I mostly got that Macintosh computer up there that doesn't work anymore. It turns on, the disk drive doesn't work. But but the point is that you want to make sure that the things that you would like to have happen when you're no longer here happen.
Your wishes are honored then.
Absolutely. And what's even more important than that is letting somebody know what you would want to have happen if you're alive and can't speak for yourself.
Yeah.
That's even more important because to be in that twilight area where you're still alive and unable to speak. Everyone should have an advocate. We all need to appoint advocates. We all need to say, in the event that I can't speak for myself, here's the person who knows what my deal breakers are. Here's the person who knows what will happen on my last day.
Yeah.
And that's an extremely important decision to make, and not just make the decision, but formalize it. Put it in writing. Have an attorney draft it for you so it's legal. In this country we have what are called HIPAA laws. It's if you do not put in writing who your advocate is, they can't be your advocate. Doesn't matter if they're your spouse or your parent. It doesn't matter. You need to have it in writing, or the medical personnel don't have to speak to anybody. You have to have a piece of paper that says it's okay, and that's extremely important. So I go around annoying people all the time, telling you you have to have a living will. Please put it in writing. It doesn't matter if you think you're too poor for it to matter. I'm sorry. You can afford a few $100 to get an attorney to write up this stuff for you and get it executed the right way so that you have all your ducks in a row.
Yeah. So through all this journey then, what has been your definition of courage? Because from the sounds of it, it may have changed a bit after you've gone through this process.
I think courage is being scared out of your mind and doing the right thing anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely what you faced through this entire journey with your parents, being scared of what's to come, but facing it anyway. Yep, I love it.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I've always been the one who kind of keeps calm when things are going crazy. I have my breakdown later when everybody else is when everybody else is drunk. But yeah, so I'm very, very fortunate, and I hope that people will learn from my example. But the things that happen to me don't just happen to other people, they happen to most people.